Hi everyone, my name is Sandra and I normally make videos about travel and Slovenian culture because this is where I come from. But today we'll be covering 11 beginner travel photography mistakes I used to make. So hopefully you guys can learn from me and improve your travel photography. By the way, you can expect a lot more photography content on my channel from now on. If travel is my first passion, photography is definitely my second, and they kind of go hand in hand for me. And you know what? I just feel like there's not enough female representation online when it comes to photography, especially in the travel niche. So I thought I would enter the picture, kind of. I'll be doing lots of beginner advice type videos to start with. So if you're just getting into photography yourself, make sure you subscribe to my channel and yeah, I guess come along for the journey. But let's now go to 11 beginner travel photography mistakes to avoid. These are all the mistakes I used to make at the beginning of my photography journey, and when I fixed them, my photos definitely got a whole lot better. Let's start with the first one, which is always shooting at your own eye level. In most cases, taking photos at your eye level, there's nothing wrong with it, obviously, unless you're shooting like an animal or a child, in which case you should definitely kneel down so that you're at their eye level. Yeah, if you're like shooting landscapes, there's nothing wrong per se with shooting at eye level, but it will make your image very ordinary because that's how most people take photos. But if you try to find a more interesting angle, if you try to kneel down, you can get a way better shot that not many people have seen before. For example, if you're taking a photo of a mountain, you can just walk to a mountain or like to some sort of a viewing platform, take a photo and be done with it. However, you can also kneel down. There might be some flowers in the foreground and you can take a photo of the mountain with some flowers in front, and that will make the image completely different and definitely more interesting. Another mistake I used to make all the time is always centering my shot. I used to always place my subject in the middle of the photo, which again is not wrong. However, placing your subject either more to the right or more to the left side can definitely make your photos look more interesting again, and also a little bit more professional because not everything has to be in the center always. Something that I hadn't necessarily done myself, but I noticed a lot of people around me do it, is chopping off people's limbs, parts of faces. If you're taking a portrait of someone, make sure to leave enough space between the neck and, let's say, the boob area. If you crop the photo at their neck, it will look very, very wrong. I've noticed a lot of people do that when taking portraits. They just don't leave enough space here. They would cut off the photo at the neck, completely ignore the upper body part, and they would also leave a lot of space above the head, which it just doesn't make a good photo in terms of composition. It just looks very strange. Same when it comes to full body shots. If you're taking a full body shot, make sure all of the limbs are in the picture. Make sure the feet are in the shot. Don't accidentally crop off the feet. That's a very common mistake. Or cropping off the body where the joints are, like at knees or at elbows, also doesn't quite work. Moving on to mistake number 4. Mistake number 4 is thinking you have to take photos when the sky is clear. Just the other day when we were making plans for the photo shoot, one of my clients was like, "Ooh, I really hope we have super sunny weather tomorrow." And I was like, I really hope we don't. The light is way too harsh on a sunny day. You get really strange shadows on your face. So your photos either don't turn out well most often, or you just constantly have to look for some shade to take the photos. So yeah, shooting on a cloudy day is actually way better than shooting when the sun's out, unless obviously we're talking about shooting at sunset or at sunrise, which is when the light is at its best. I love shooting at sunset, especially during the nice soft yellow golden hour. That's when you obviously do want sun. But yeah, if you're like exploring a place all day long or having like an all day long photo shoot that you just can't move to the golden hour, you know, a cloudy day always works better. Mistake number 5 has a lot to do with a super sunny day actually. I'm talking about blown out highlights. I used to do that all the time before I actually started to understand photography. Blowout highlights are these very bright spots in your photos. It usually happens with the sky because if the sun is really bright, your camera won't adjust properly. So when you put the photos onto your laptop, for example, to check them out, you will see that you lost the color of the sky. Let's say it's not blue, it's white. This doesn't only happen with the sky, obviously, it happens with buildings, with people. So make sure to not overexpose your photos. It's better for your exposure to be lower than higher. If you have more shadows, more darker areas going on in the photo, that was a very strange sentence, I'm sorry about that. But you can always lift up the shadows, so make the dark parts of the photo lighter. It's very easy to do that in editing programs, but if an image is overexposed and you lose the color, you just can't really bring it back. Another mistake I used to make as a beginner photographer was thinking I always need to have the latest cameras. There's a lot of people who ask me for advice when they're buying new cameras, and a lot of them will come to me with like a super expensive camera and ask me, "Ooh, do you think this camera is good for a beginner?" And I will say no. Because you don't need a camera with a 3,000 euro price tag if you're just starting to learn how to take photos. You can get great DSLRs nowadays for about 600 euros. Start with that, save money, and invest in lenses instead of a camera body. Lenses are far more important. Every lens will help you achieve like a different type of photo. The camera body will just help it get there, if you know what I mean. Obviously, if you're taking photos professionally and know what you're doing, you will eventually want to upgrade the camera body as well because it has more functions. But when you're a beginner photographer, save the money and invest in lenses, not a super expensive camera body. By the way, I will be making a separate video on which lenses to look into when you're building up your kit, so stay tuned for that. Let's move on to another mistake. I used to really struggle with taking sharp photos, and I've noticed that a lot of people do, especially if their hands are a bit shaky. Mine are. Number one tip is do not walk while taking photos. I used to do that all the time. You know how it is when you sometimes go traveling and you're in a big group of people and you want to take photos of everything, but you don't have time to stop, so you're just like walking and taking photos along the way. Don't do that. Just stop for a second, take a shot, move forward. What I would also suggest you to do, because sometimes you can take a blurry photo even when standing completely still, so before you call it a day, I would check the photo you took on your LCD screen and zoom in. I never used to do that. I used to check a photo, it looked sharp to me on the LCD screen, but if you actually zoom it in, then you will really see if it's sharp or not, especially if you've captured some sort of a text in the photo or eyes or something like that. Long story short, my tip is don't trust the LCD screen, always zoom in to check the sharpness. Now you may ask, but Sandra, how do I then make the photo sharp if it always turns out blurry? One of the solutions is to use a tripod, especially if you're dealing with low lighting. A tripod is your best friend, but I know it's not always very convenient to carry it around. I most often don't, to be honest, unless I know I'll be shooting something where it's going to be really dark, or if I'll be shooting long exposure. These are kind of the only times where I would actually take my tripod with me. Something I normally do is I'm gonna shoot at higher shutter speed. If you don't know what I'm talking about, stay tuned for my how not to shoot in auto video. But if you already have the basics covered, if you know what shutter speed is, definitely bump it up. Also, if you like to shoot in aperture mode to get that bokeh effect behind you, sometimes if you shoot at a really low aperture, yes, you might get the blurry background, but if it's too low and you're, let's say, taking a photo of a person, it might happen that their nose is sharp, but the rest of the face is blurred, which is what you definitely don't want. In this case, it means that your aperture is set too low, so just again bump up the numbers so that it focuses on the whole face, not just a part of it. Another big mistake beginner photographers make is not paying attention to the horizon. A lot of the times you will see photos of your friends going to the seaside and they'll take a photo on the beach and the sea will not look straight. It will look like a very steep hill. This is something that you don't want to do. So if you can, try to take a photo with a straight horizon, or you can obviously just fix it in post-production. Speaking of editing, another mistake I used to make is not editing my photos at all. For some reason, I always thought that editing your photos is bad. I thought that you have to edit them because they're not good enough. I also had a perception of editing the photo makes the photo fake, which, I mean, in some cases it can be true, but more often than not, editing is a very essential part of any photographer's process. I would say 50% of my work is taking the photos, and then another 50% is editing those actual photos. With editing, you can not only fix the little mistakes that you didn't notice before or that you couldn't change, but it also allows you to develop your own style, to, you know, change colors, make the photo more you, achieve different effects. You can make the photo very light and airy, or you can make it like super moody. This is all achieved through editing. When I was younger and I was looking at photos, I always thought that, oh, the photographers must be amazing because my photos never looked like that, you know? When you look a photo at a magazine, it was like, how did that person do it? Like those amazing colors, like they must have such great skills to take that photo in camera. Well, they don't. It's just editing. That was a huge breakthrough for me. Obviously these days it's a little bit different because now everyone's on their phones editing photos for their Instagram. So most people know that, yeah, you kind of need to edit the photos for them to look better. But yeah, I definitely didn't at first. Speaking of editing the photos for Instagram and stuff, try to avoid like filters that are already inbuilt in Instagram and in some other apps, because sometimes they just make your photos look worse. Try to learn how to edit in Lightroom. Lightroom on mobile is free and you can do so much with it. Again, if you want to, I can make a tutorial. But yeah, basically what I wanted to say is editing is really important. So don't ignore it and don't overdo it. My second to last mistake is also related to editing actually. When I did discover the joys of editing, what I did and what I notice most beginner photographers do still is to bump up the saturation and bump up the contrast. I don't know why so many people do it. I don't know why I thought this was ever a brilliant idea. Oversaturated, over-contrasted photos, they just don't look great. The new phones obviously have great cameras, but some of those great phones also come with, I don't know, some sort of preset modes in cameras or something that just make your photos super saturated when you take them. Super saturated shots is what professional photographers avoid. It just doesn't look natural, doesn't look quite right. Okay, my last beginner photography mistake that I'm gonna talk about is always shooting in auto. I think every single one of us has been there, done that. I was doing that for many years, definitely a few years too long if you ask me. Shooting photos on auto most likely will not get you, you know, really bad shots, because cameras nowadays are really smart and the auto function will help you get good photo. However, if you want to level up and if you want to take different type of shots which you can't really in auto, you definitely need to learn how to shoot in manual, how to use aperture, shutter speed, ISO, all that jazz that I will be teaching you about in one of my upcoming videos. But on that note as well, it doesn't mean that you always have to shoot in manual either. I feel like a lot of professional photographers will say that you're not a real photographer if you're not shooting in manual all the time, and I definitely don't agree with that. While I would never really shoot in auto anymore, I often shoot in like aperture priority, and there's nothing wrong with that. I actually know quite a few photographers who do that as well. It really depends on circumstances which setting, you know, works best. But if you do have a DSLR, it would be a shame to just shoot in auto, because your world opens up when you start using other modes. In auto, you can never take those nice long exposure shots of nice waterfalls or the Milky Way or, you know, someone running. So don't just shoot in auto. Subscribe to my channel and watch out for the video where I'll be teaching you about all the basic settings to hopefully take you off shooting in auto exclusively. Yeah, those were the 11 beginner travel photography mistakes I used to make. Let me know in a comment down below if you've noticed making those mistakes yourself. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you soon in my next one. Bye!
About to leave, already packing, come with me, I'm not really asking.